Could it be that your relationships aren't working out because you are enmeshed? Enmeshment is a very fascinating thing. It's pseudo intimacy, and it's usually started in early childhood in families where boundaries are diffused, basically meaning that there are no boundaries at all, meaning that everyone is just invested unnecessarily and in a very unhealthy way in each other's shit, right? Enmeshment usually breeds codependency. Codependency is uh, I'm only good if you're good. I'm always tuned into you to make sure that you're okay. If you're not okay, then I can't be okay. How you feel about me is how I feel about me, and it's just a really fucked up dynamic. And if you don't heal that, if you don't take care of that, then it basically transfers into your adult life, and then it becomes your adult relationships, right? A lot of people are actually enmeshed when they believe that they are in love, right? Now, I'm not here to invalidate people's experiences of being in love, but what I am here to do is say that a lot of the times when people think that they're in the best relationship they've ever been in, they're actually enmeshed. And it has to do with comfort and familiarity to childhood, right? How does enmeshment fuck up relationships? Well, people that are enmeshed, they don't have healthy boundaries for starters. They're likely not individuated and differentiated. What do those two things mean? So, individuation is basically when you are your own individual. You've developed that for yourself, usually very early on in childhood, in a healthy childhood. People that don't get that in a healthy childhood, hopefully they can get it. They can give it to themselves later on in life. Individuation is when you separate yourself from the pack, right? And you separate yourself in terms of how you think, how you feel. Um, your thoughts are your own thoughts, your opinions are your own opinions, your feelings are your own feelings. You're allowed to be autonomous, right? So you separate yourself away from your family of origin in that sense, right? Differentiation has a lot more to do, from my own opinion, with boundaries, right? Differentiating between self and other, right? Um, your shit versus my shit versus your shit, boundaries, right? Um, and that's the thing too, like a lot of people that don't get that, they end up in relationships with people that are deeply enmeshed, right? And they end up taking on a bunch of responsibilities from these other people that they don't actually need to, but it's because the other people, well, usually both people are emotionally immature and don't understand self versus other. And this is not a matter of like competition. It's not like me against you or like me versus you. No, it's like my stuff, your stuff, boundary, right? Um, Relationships that are enmeshed don't have that dynamic. So one person or both people end up taking on a fuck ton of responsibility of the other person unnecessarily. And it really leads to a lot of distraction in the person's life. And it leads to a lot of overwhelm. It leads to a lot of stuff that the person just starts to maybe think to themselves, is this really what I should be doing? Right? Um, Enmeshment is not a healthy dynamic. It's not, because it voids personal and individual autonomy. It really does. It has you distracted from your own life, from your own self, from everything that you could be doing for yourself, right? You are only responsible for yourself as an adult, right? If there is a child involved, it's a different story. But if you're in a relationship, if you are a full grown adult and you are in a relationship with another adult, you are only responsible for yourself. You're not responsible for them. You're not responsible for their mental and emotional well being. You're not responsible for their finances. You're not responsible for anything, right? Say for instance, you as a child learned that it was your responsibility to financially caretake, right? Maybe at an inappropriate age you were made to get a job, right? And you were made to help the family with money, right? That is not healthy. And then usually if you don't heal that, you end up repeating that later on, and you attract a partner who needs money. And so it feels comfortable, familiar, and safe, right? It's not healthy. It's not. You are responsible for you. So healing that element and understanding that you're responsible for you, you're not responsible for them, it can change the entire dynamic. Enmeshment really fucks up relationships because, I mean, a majority of the relationships I've seen throughout my entire life have actually been enmeshed. Um, and when I say that, I mean also like a lot of my own as well. No names, I'm not going to get into detail of any of that stuff, but it's just like, yeah, enmeshment voids healthy relationships because it is not a healthy dynamic. Enmeshment is pseudo intimacy, right? Imagine feeling like you need to be plugged into somebody else's mental and emotional well-being like 24/7, right? You can't be okay unless they're okay. That's not healthy, right? It's not. Imagine how that leaves you feeling. It leaves you feeling exhausted. But like at the same time, it's not just exhausted. Like you feel like you need to do it, but you feel exhausted at the same time. It's almost like you feel alive because that's the only way that you know how to feel alive, but you also feel exhausted at the same time. It's a totally back and forth dynamic, right? Um, Enmeshment fucks up relationships because people that don't have healthy boundaries, people that don't have that healthy individuation and differentiation, never actually got to experience what it's like to be a healthy individual and to be self focused. And there's nothing wrong with being self focused. There's nothing wrong with choosing yourself. Choosing yourself is a necessary and healthy thing, right? Um, but people that learned dynamics of enmeshment and then also further created dynamics of enmeshment in their relationships later on because that was comfortable and familiar, they don't know what it's like to be in a relationship with somebody that has healthy boundaries and is individuated and differentiated. In fact, if they are neck deep in enmeshment throughout their entire lives, they're going to run away from somebody who has healthy boundaries, who is individuated and differentiated, because it's just not going to feel right. It's not going to feel comfortable and familiar, right? But how often is it that we realize now that the things that feel comfortable and familiar to us, like it just feels like home. It feels right. No, you're just repeating a pattern from childhood. You're repeating a pattern of a dynamic that you learned that is actually unhealthy. It feels comfortable and familiar. It feels right because it's all that you've ever known. It's all you've ever had. But it's not healthy. It's not. And let me say this and make this very clear, right? Um, Enmeshment really fucking sucks. It does. And when you understand that you can actually have a dynamic that's drastically different from that and actually healthy, everything transforms. It really does. You are not interested in being in a dynamic with somebody that is so just tangled up with them. That's really what enmeshment is. Being tangled up with somebody. That's a really great metaphor, really great example. Um, it's a distraction from your own life, right? So what if enmeshment is actually distracting you from your own life? What if you don't realize how distracting your relationship is? One, because it's comfortable and familiar, but two, it's distracting you from your own life. It's distracting you from your own financial life. It's distracting you from your own, you know, your own self, right? Your own mental and emotional well-being. Are you sacrificing your mental and emotional well-being for somebody else's mental and emotional well-being because they are emotionally underdeveloped and they don't know how to self-soothe, they don't know how to regulate, they never learned those skills, and therefore you are an external regulator for them? Enmeshment, right? Their shit is their shit, your shit is your shit. Having that boundary be diffused causes a lot of chaos in relationships, and people usually just tend to believe that that's the way that relationships are supposed to be. That's the way that unhealthy relationships are supposed to be. Relationships without healthy boundaries, without proper boundaries set in place, that's how they're supposed to be. Yeah, but that's not how relationships are supposed to be. That's not how healthy relationships are supposed to be. And when you really understand this for what it is, it can really transform your entire life, right? So there's a likelihood that, I mean, not a likelihood, it's just the reality of it. Enmeshment fucks up relationships. It does. Um, Diffused boundaries, no boundaries at all, unhealthy boundaries, a lack of individuation, a lack of differentiation. All of these things fuck up relationships. That's just the reality of it.